The anti-vaxxer take on autism that is related to vaccines is a gigantic coping mechanism. For people who don't want to face up to the fact that the real cause of autism is, in fact, an increase in the frequency of mainly paternally transmitted de novo mutations, which are accumulating as a part of a legacy load in the face of the massively relaxed purifying selection, as evidenced by the collapse in infant, child, and maternal mortality, which is the primary mechanism through which purifying selection operates. When you go from a situation where your odds of having the capacity to fully participate in reproduction are less than 30% to one where your odds are 99%, then that increases the likelihood that people carrying mutations that would previously exclude them from reproduction are able to get to participate in reproduction, simply because there's no cost anymore to the accumulation of those mutations in terms of direct cost to the individual organism. And as a consequence of that, you end up with this rather unfortunate situation in which conditions like autistic-like personality and similar conditions such as schizophrenia, there's a thing called the recency hypothesis, which is very controversial. A chap looked into the medical literature prior to the 18th century could not find any descriptions in the medical literature. And these guys kept very good notes of things. And you can see lots of diseases which were present in people and were not called by their modern names but were clearly there. A syndrome molecule was clearly described. Any diagnostician looking at the notes say this person's medieval peasant or whatever had this condition of that condition. There's nothing like schizophrenia in the literature, the medical literature prior to the 18th century. It seems to have been a disease which arose during the Enlightenment and has increased. You don't think that someone like Joan of Arc had schizophrenia? No, probably not. She might have had other psychotic conditions, but not schizophrenia, as characterized by a pronounced social dysfunction as a function of being so badly handicapped by the mixing of senses essentially, and the mixed wiring with the brain, that it prevents you from being able to function at all. So this kind of very profound schizophrenia, with this the strange periods where people with schizophrenia will go into these weird almost coma-like states to cope with things, and where they have these rapid sort of shifts in behaviour and these outbursts, mania and hallucinations, and all this sort of thing. That seems to be a disease which was first described in the 18th century. This is the recency hypothesis. What about autism? I don't know about autism, but if you look at the secular trend data, even if you control the diagnostic switching eye, the increasing numbers of people with just very low IQ being diagnosed or misdiagnosed as autists. Even if you control for that, the secular trend is still upwards over time, so presumably that's also a recent disease. You don't think somebody like Isaac Newton or whatever had autism? Yes, they might have had it, but we need to distinguish between about a specific kind of autism which is associated with very severe social dysfunction, which might not have been characteristic of someone like Isaac Newton, for whom it was an asset in terms of being able to really focus on math and memory.